We are going to be talking now in regards to Biden's failed promises, and I'm going to be bringing over our guest. And we have here, hello, Ben. How are you this morning?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good, good. Are you originally from the UK? It said on your profile UK, and I wasn't sure if that was correct or not.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. I'm actually from the Washington D.C. area.
Oh, are you really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great, great. Where are you based out of now? Are you in DC?
Yeah, as of now, I'm actually in Northern Virginia, about 15 minutes outside of downtown
Sure,
D.C.
sure. I lived there for 20 some years. I know.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, yeah. And I had reached out to Anders just to get the pronunciation of your last name, and unfortunately, I didn't hear back. So I apologize. Can you please just let everybody know your name and you are a commentator with Young Voices?
Yeah, absolutely. My last name is Ayanian, and as you said, first name is Ben. And if you butcher my last name, it's no problem at all. It happens all the time.
Well, Ben, I'm glad to have you here. If you would share just briefly with our audience, we have listeners tuning in on Defenders Live Talk Radio, and then many people are watching us on the different social channels. If you could share with them briefly about Young Voices, and then we're going to hit the Biden topic pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Young Voices, we're a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to getting the voices of young individuals who are, pro-liberty out
Mhm.
to the public. They help connect us contributors with different, podcasts and radio shows, like
Mhm.
yours,
Mhm.
and outlets. They help us pitch to our writings to certain outlets, and so it's a wonderful organization. It's a nonprofit, and
Mhm.
they do a great job of helping us contributors, get our ideas and our commentary out to the public.
Well, I'm really impressed. I actually had on Portia from the UK back as they announced that the Queen had passed. And obviously, we've been all watching this for about a week or so now, all the processions and the ceremonies and things of that nature. So I've been very impressed with Young Voices and what you bring to the table. But let's get down to the nitty gritty here. Not a fan of Biden, never have been, never will be. And your Newsweek piece hit the nail on the head on so many different levels. And, the title of it, as I announced earlier, was Biden has failed to keep his most important promise. So let me ask you this. What was his most important promise?
Yeah, to me, his most important promise was when he would go on stage and tell the American people that he was not going to be a divider, that he was going to unify the American people. That was his promise. That was his main appeal to a lot of people in the middle, and even some, what certain people call, never Trump conservatives. The appeal to Joe Biden was that he was supposed to be some semblance of a return to normalcy and civility, and that he was going to act to be a unifier. And he promised all sorts of things on his campaign trail, like every presidential candidate does.
Mhm.
But a lot of the things that have to do, with policy were really not attractive to even a lot of individuals that voted for him. I think a lot of people just wanted to believe that President Biden was going to be able to come in and unify the American people, because leading up to the election, we were in a very tumultuous place, with COVID-19, and then following the murder of George Floyd. It was very chaotic, it felt like, in the United States. And so he promised, as I'm going to come in, calm everything down, I will, be a unifier. And I think he's utterly failed to uphold that promise.
Well, you broke it down in the article, and I have shared it on the comments section for people to look at your article that was in Newsweek. And you really broke it down into a lot of different spaces. And, you even said, according to Pew Research statistics, polarization has continued to worsen during the Biden presidency. So, my question to you is, do you miss the mean tweets? I mean, look at all, seriously, I mean, I worked for Trump, and I am one of those MAGA conservatives. I didn't say MAGA Republican. I said MAGA conservatives. And, when Trump, you cite in the article, Trump being in Philadelphia or in Wilkes-Barre, and then Biden being in Constitution Hall in Philadelphia. And that background that Biden had there was not a unifier. It looked like the Hunger Games more than anything. And it was very, it was one scary to those who may have voted for him and said, okay, what did we get ourselves into? I take my vote back, right? He is not unifying the country, especially when he's calling people like me and every other bleeding heart American who carries their guns and says, wait a second here. We're not the problem. We're the one that is fighting for this nation. So, my question to you is, as we head into 2024, and he was on Scott Pellett last night on CBS, and he said, COVID is over. What are your thoughts to that? Is he trying to take back, all this stuff that he has undone? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, Joe Biden has said a lot of, untrue things, again, as a lot of presidents do. They're not always truthful, and they have an incentive to try and twist the facts to support their narrative, and he's done that time and time again.
Mhm.
Before the election in 2020, COVID-19 was, the one of the most, catastrophic things in the world. If you listen to Joe Biden, that, everybody was going to die, and he even early on in his presidency in 2021, in December, he warned everyone that the unvaccinated were all going to get really sick and die,
Mhm.
and that, it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated, even though Rochelle Walensky of the CDC had admitted in the summer
Mhm.
that the COVID-19 vaccines were not great at stopping the spread of
Mhm.
COVID-19. She said that they weren't able to do that.
Mhm.
And then, as we know, the Omicron variant is not as virulent as past variants, so people did not start dying left and right as Joe Biden made it seem like was going to happen. And so, yes, I think that he is trying to set things up in a way that are favorable to him,
Mhm.
towards the midterms coming up and
Mhm.
also moving forward for 2024. And I think the biggest problem with, you brought up his speech, the ominous red light shining on him, and then you see the Marines in the background, and which is pretty hypocritical because,
Yes.
Trump was disparaged for using the military
Yes.
as, props in some of his engagements. And I actually think it's a fair criticism. I just think the criticism has to be consistent.
Mhm.
And the problem is that it seems to only be one sided. I think what he gets wrong in his speech, a large number of things, but I know
Mhm.
the fascist, the semi-fascist, the MAGA Republican semi-fascist. That was his point. That was his
Mhm.
main driver,
Mhm.
and I think he fundamentally misunderstands, what he's saying to a degree. I think, personally, you can point to certain things that, some Republican Senate candidates have said that are very unsettling in my mind, and we can get
Mhm.
into that if you'd like. But
Yeah.
the problem is he paints with such a broad brush that,
Mhm.
what does MAGA Republican mean? And
Mhm.
actually, Reuters conducted a poll in 2018 asking voters, what does MAGA mean to you?
Mhm.
And, 60%, over 60% of respondents said a better economy. And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
almost 40% said lower taxes. Now, I do think it's unsettling that, 25-ish percent said it means Donald Trump.
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of fanaticism. I think it's actually somewhat dangerous if we put so much hope in a person
Mhm.
versus a set of principles. But
Mhm.
again, better economy or lower taxes, what part of that is, this, I don't know what semi-fascism means, but
Mhm. Mhm.
I think he paints with too broad of a brush, and all it does is turn Americans against each other. And actually, polling data says the majority of Americans,
Yeah.
even, independents, say it was a divisive speech.
Yeah, it was very divisive. I agree with you where we should, as American people, not put our hope in one person versus another because ultimately they're going to fail us. But I also say to you, at the end of the day, you look to Biden and it was though he was, the second coming, if you will, to during that election. And it was though he was going to be taking back the country and healing the country and saving the country. No one can do that. My faith is more powerful than in any my faith's more powerful than in a president. Bottom line, Republican, Democrat, or whatever.
Mm,
But I looked to, a lot of people look to Biden as, well, he's gonna take care of us. We're going to get out of this pandemic. We're going to get our jobs back. We're going to have a normal life. But that has not been the case. It's been the complete opposite. From an international standpoint, let's take it to another level here for a second. Seeing the Hunger Games portrayed in my, I wouldn't say my hometown, but I grew up in Pennsylvania and not too far from there. So I say, seeing the Hunger Games portrayed on that stage, my husband being an Army veteran and seeing those Marines back there used as a tool was an insult and a disgrace and a vile obstruction of justice in my standpoint from where I sit as a veteran spouse and a veteran caregiver. And to all the military spouses in our area and families, that was such an insult and a slap in the face. But at that level, talk to me about us on the world stage. Do we actually are we safe, or are we sitting ducks right now? China, Taiwan, Ukraine, Russia. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, from a national security standpoint, I think it's really complex, and I don't want to pretend that, I know how secure we are. I
Mhm.
think every day we see people, go on television and talk about either, the end of the world is coming, or no, everything's fine. And I
Right.
don't think that anybody truly knows, but I do think from a world stage perspective, I don't think that I don't feel as though we are super respected at the
Mhm.
moment.
Mhm.
I mean, you saw our withdrawal from Afghanistan was incredibly unorganized and put a lot of people in harm's way. And we saw how
Mhm.
quickly Afghanistan fell as well during
Right.
that. And then um, on top of that, we're shoveling money to Ukraine, and I mean something that the American government does funnel out money. But whether or not we're truly respected you know with Joe Biden in office, I don't believe so. I mean, I think that
Mhm.
he does come off as rather weak and unorganized. I mean, that was another selling point for him was the in the Trump administration, there was a lot of turnover. There were a
Mhm.
lot of people coming in and out, people working there for a year, 2 years, being gone,
Mhm.
and it was being painted as a very hectic administration. And then Joe Biden, his administration has been incredibly unorganized, and it seems that
Mhm.
they've just been trying to do patchwork. When
Mhm.
polling numbers probably get low on certain issues, they throw something out like
Yep.
the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yep. Yep.
It's so I'm not 100% sure, like I said, what's gonna happen with China and Taiwan. I mean, if you remember before Ukraine, the
Mhm.
Russian invasion of Ukraine, there were plenty of people going on TV and saying, "No, that's not gonna happen. Russia's not gonna invade." You
Mhm.
also didn't have a lot of people saying Russia's certainly gonna invade. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people pontificate online about
Mhm.
exactly what's going to happen. I don't want to be that person who
Mhm.
pretends to tell
Mhm.
your audience I know what's going to happen. But I
Mhm.
can say I don't feel that Joe Biden is in a position to handle whatever comes effectively. I
Mhm.
don't have faith in him putting together a coherent, organized, and effective response to whatever comes. And what
Mhm.
that response should be, it's another thing people can debate. But yeah, I don't have faith in him on the world stage.
Well, as we're looking towards the general elections in November, we have a lot coming down the pike. I live here in the great state of North Carolina. We are a battleground state, and we have a lot of issues at the forefront. One thing that we are seeing here, just to kind of give you a taste of outside the Beltway, because I remember being inside the Beltway all those years. In many ways, I think members of Congress and elected officials lose touch with their constituents. And they get so engrossed with the under the table dealings, and it's right there. I mean, I saw it for so many years. But at the end of the day, what's really happening here is we have a lot of northerners, and I am a northern myself, coming to the south, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida. And I always say the further south you get, the freer you become. And it's very true in many senses because the mandates were lifted a long time ago. Whereas, as I go back up to Pennsylvania and upstate New York, there are still mandates in place in some aspects. And that is very concerning. So I wonder, so going back to the general election that's about to happen in November, I do think we are going to see a turn. I do think because of everything that has been unfolding, and as you said, the disorganized mechanism of the White House, the spin cycle that's coming from the communications department is not in touch with the reality of the American people. The reality of the American people is they want food on their table, they want money in their pockets, they want their savings replenished. They don't want to have to pay $5 for a gas, for a gallon of gas, or et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the day, they want to be able to say, okay, my job is secure, because we aren't going to be looking to every other world nation to fund us. And that's what it seems like it's becoming. It feels as though, and you look around, are we living in a third world country? And I think what is happening is, I think we are going to see people rise up in the States and say, no, enough is enough. And I think they're going to show that in November. I think they're going to show that as things start to unfold in November for the general elections. But what do you say to the general elections in that vein? If you want to go through, highlight some of the things that Biden could save for the November elections in the sense of saving himself, and also highlight some of the things that are just not going to be saved at this point.
Well, I think that the, Republican attacks on President Biden, I think should really stick to his, his incompetence, for lack of a better word, his hypocrisy. Let's just take one example of his
Yeah,
hypocrisy real quick.
yeah.
So, the classical definition of fascism is when big business and big government basically get into bed together. It's when, the government kind of directs business to certain production process activities, rather production activities, and then business looks in turn to government for protection of their interests. And so, I mean, if you ask me, both political parties in this country have not been shy about corporate welfare,
Mhm.
and they have not committed themselves to a competitive free market, in my mind. But let's take a look at the Biden administration, because they're
Mhm.
the ones in office right
Right.
now. So you have states carrying out, ESG investing, which is, social investing, trying to promote,
Mhm.
investing companies with certain values that they're putting out,
Mhm.
progressive values, specifically.
Mhm.
And so you have state pensions investing pension dollars in these companies to try to promote things that people wouldn't vote for
Mhm.
through corporations. And then you see the Biden administration pressuring, Facebook to try and crack down on certain information online. You see the FBI coming
Mhm.
to all these social media companies saying, Russian propaganda is going to be coming around election time, and then boom, the laptop story about Hunter Biden is
Right.
shut down.
Right.
And then now, you have credit card companies, because of an international board in Geneva, creating a new category for guns. Now are tracking, gun purchases at gun stores in a different
Mhm.
way, so that they
Yeah.
can try to keep eye on suspicious activity when
Mhm.
no one has explained what's going to be the definition of suspicious.
Mhm.
How is this going to help? Like, it's honestly really unsettling. And so I don't think Joe Biden can change, for example, inflation. That's another topic. He can't get rid of, the, fascist activities by definition that his administration has engaged in, and again, past Republican administrations have supported as well. But and then inflation is another thing that he's not able to help. I do think a big misconception on the right is that Joe Biden is, per se, the cause of inflation. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon. Deficit spending doesn't typically cause inflation. The reason why it did this time is because of the way we financed it. We financed it through monetization by the Federal Reserve. So that's printing money. So
Mhm.
that's why inflation ensues. Normally, if you try to fund deficit spending with, say, bond sales, which is borrowing against the future, then you don't get inflation. You just get a reshifting of investment. So now, instead of me having $5,000 to invest in private companies and, growing the economy, I'm now taking my $5,000 and investing it in government bonds. So that's why you
Mhm.
don't have inflation occur from that. But so if we want inflation to go down, it's a Federal Reserve task. It's not going to be Congress. It's not going to be the president. But that's another thing he's not going to be able to fix, and that's ultimately going to hurt because the Democrats spent way too much, and the Federal Reserve allowed it to turn into massive inflation. So it is both. It's both their fault. It's just the simple fact of the matter is he's not going to be able to fix that before the midterms, and neither is the Federal Reserve. And so I think at the end of the day, Joe Biden is under, some deep water when it comes to the midterms, but I also think the Republicans have hurt themselves with some of the candidates that they have chosen to run, like JD Vance particularly. We can get into specifics of that if you'd like. And on top of that, I think the focus on Donald Trump is not good for the Republican Party. When the focus comes to jumping to Trump's defense, they tend to do worse in the polls. And so I think if the Republicans want to have that wave you're talking about, they really need to get on message about Joe Biden and let go like the Trump, the deep state rhetoric. It's not digested by enough of America for it to be beneficial for them to focus on that in the midterms. Ben Shapiro, a conservative commentator,
Mhm,
pointed out that
mhm,
people don't vote for things at the moment; they vote against things, and
mhm.
so the message cannot be we're going to defend Trump, we're going to, go after this deep state. The message has to be Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Joe Biden, because there is a terrible record there that Republicans can just really hone in on.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
we'll see that red wave that you are talking about.
Well, in regards to the red wave, though, I agree with you on it needs to be focused. I think at the end of the day, what is going to be focused on if this red wave really does happen is the fact that Americans are looking for money in their pockets, not money back in the government's pockets, not elected officials who are taking their money, not looking at the Federal Reserve. They don't care about that. At the end of the day, they balance their checkbooks. Why can't the government balance theirs? That's the
Absolutely.
that's the biggest problem. And when I see Biden going to Martha's Vineyard and when I see him going to Delaware all the time, what is he actually doing? But he is spending my tax dollars traveling back and forth when he should be there getting things done for the American people. And instead, he's taking that away from us. I run this small business here aside from this radio show and did my taxes. And I said, Dear God in heaven, do I need to move to Florida? Because North Carolina is raping every business owner here with state income taxes. And then all the tax benefits that we did get under the Trump administration gone out the window. So I say to those who are going to get out there and vote for this red wave, educate yourself. Educate yourself on your candidates, on what is happening in your states. Educate yourself on where your money is and where it isn't. Because at the end of the day, you want to put somebody in office who's going to put money back in your pockets. And I saw that time and time again when I was on the campaign trail as a candidate myself and also behind the scenes. People were wanting to know, are they going to replenish their savings? Are they going to be able to put food on the table for their kids? Are those truckers going to be able to get to point A to point B to put the food in the supermarkets? It really does trickle down. So the pond scum of the swamp has trickled down here into the beautiful waters of North Carolina and Florida. But it is the American people that need to stand up and say, our voices are going to be heard. We are going to vote. We are going to stand up. We're going to run for local elections. We're going to run. We're going to get money back in the pockets of the American people. As I've gone on my rant, I really have enjoyed having you here. Can you also tell us what other pieces you're going to be writing within the next couple of weeks and where we can find you?
Yeah, so I'm working on a couple of pieces at the moment, and if you want to follow my writings, the best way to do that is on Twitter.
Okay.
Um, Follow me at Benjamin Ayanian. I tweet out all of my media appearances and
Okay.
articles published. I do the same on my Instagram. If you want to find that, it's if you just search Benjamin Ayanian, it'll be the only one that pops up.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where you guys can follow me, and hopefully I'll have some more pieces coming out. There's stuff happening every day
Yes.
right now, as I'm sure you know. So there's plenty of stuff to write about.
Well, Benjamin, I would love to have you back. I just am so grateful for Young Voices and what you guys are doing. So, thank you for continuing to put truth out there. Thank you for entertaining my audience this morning with me. And it is my Monday morning high coffee rant, but I'm grateful that you came this morning to join us. And I look forward to having you back again. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. I look forward to chatting again.
All right. Have a great week. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.